What's going on, y'all? Eric Moser here with Code Red Conversations. In today's episode, I'll be discussing two major events. The first one, two ISIS-inspired suspects just tried to bomb an anti-Islamic protest outside of Gracie Mansion, the home of extremely controversial. I got a little. I don't know if y'all can hear that. Bear with me, please. All right, let me mute this real quick. All right, sorry about that. Hopefully, the folks on Instagram can hear me and there's no issue. For some reason, I was getting feedback. But we'll be discussing the bombing attempt near Zoran Mamdani's office, the highly controversial mayor of New York, as two ISIS-inspired suspects threw homemade IEDs at this protest. Thankfully, the devices failed, but what they told NYPD investigators was far worse than even that situation. And you'll want to stick with me, Eric Muldrow, as a retired Las Vegas police officer, as I discuss the headlines and some of the details that are often missed in many of the headlines, and even some of the headlines that are intentionally distorted. And you are going to want to hear this. CNN, once again, was at it again. After we break that situation down, we'll jump into a tragic story of a high school prank gone horribly wrong that you honestly have to hear in order to believe. So, once again, y'all, I appreciate y'all sticking with me. Let's jump right in.
I can confirm this morning that this is being investigated as an act of ISIS-inspired terrorism.
Two men, Amir Balat and Ibrahim Kayumi, traveled from Pennsylvania and attempted to bring violence to New York City. They are suspected of coming here to commit an act of terrorism. There is video of these two individuals throwing two devices towards the protest. The police department has determined that these were improvised explosive devices made to injure, maim, or worse. Thanks to the swift and decisive actions of NYPD officers at the scene, both men were immediately taken into custody, and the devices they brought taken off of our streets.
Yeah, that's a little quick breakdown from the mayor. Not a fan of the guy personally, but I'm definitely thankful that no one was injured. But that story, that isn't even the entire story, because we've been getting more and more information as to what the intentions were of these two young men. And the story only seems to be getting bigger and bigger. So let's check out this one right here.
Learning chilling new details about two suspects now facing federal charges in an ISIS-inspired IED attack out.
This is some of the information that we received last night. And again, this is only the second phase of what they were trying to do. Then we'll find out even more. So make sure you stick around.
Outside of the home of New York City's mayor.
CB Cotton joins us live from outside the mayor's mansion in New York City. Good morning, CB.
Brian Lawrence Ainsley, good morning. So the homemade bombs carried by the Pennsylvania teens here to New York City did not explode, but investigators say it could have been catastrophic if they had. My federal source tells me overnight more IEDs were discovered at a Pennsylvania storage unit connected to this case, and they were set off in a controlled detonation. Watch. Investigators say Ibrahim Kayumi and Amir Balat brought 2 homemade explosives to an anti-Muslim protest on Saturday that was happening not far from Gracie Mansion.
I just want to jump in real quick. The initial story or the initial focus was, even though there was reference to the fact that there was an anti-Islam protest going on, the focus seemed to have been people believing that the IED was intended towards Mamdani's home. Even though I can get the initial confusion that some may have because of where the attempted bombing took place, it was right in front of his house. But when you hear the details, it should have been pretty simple. You're hearing people, some of the witness said that the suspect, before he threw the bomb, yelled Allahu Akbar and threw it at the direction of the anti-Islamic protesters. Common sense should tell you that this wasn't directed at Mamdani, that this was directed towards the protesters. And that the one throwing the bomb, most likely, more likely than not, and this again was during the initial stages when we were just gathering information, should have told us that the odds of this being motivated from an Islamic perspective should have been very clear. But it seemed as if the news wanted to make Mamdani out to be the initial victim.
Home to New York City's first Muslim mayor. Both men made their first appearances in federal court on Monday, each facing 5 charges for attempting to support ISIS and use a weapon of mass destruction. The FBI says the suspects made several pro-ISIS statements, and one expressed wanting an attack bigger than the Boston Marathon bombing. Authorities say right now there are no links between this case and Iran, and Fox News contributor Paul Morrow says he thinks that lines up.
It's pretty clear to me that this operation that these 2 characters ran here with the 2 IEDs has been ongoing for a while, well before the attack on Iran. So I would not link what just happened to Iran. Doesn't mean that they're pleased about our attack on Iran, but it looks to me like this is something that was underway quite earlier.
But both.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure they weren't pleased with what is going down in Iran.
Men are being held without bail and are due back in court early next month. An attorney for one of the suspects suggested the co-defendants are strangers. Brian Lawrence Ainsley.
Yeah, they said they never met until the attack. Thanks so much.
Yeah, that's a little weird. I don't know how legit that is because they traveled all the way from Pennsylvania to New York. I mean, it's not that. I mean, it depends on what part. But maybe maybe they just came together. It was a plot or a plan, and they came together for that purpose. I don't know about that. But this shouldn't make anyone feel good. And I bring this up in almost every video I make because somehow it manages, some chaos going on in this country manages to tie in to the open border. Anybody with any amount of common sense, and this is the part that's so frustrating to me. I know the Democrats were motivated by having more bodies in our country so that they can get electoral seats and congressional seats, because you don't need to be a citizen in order for that to be the case. So you flood the country with illegals, then you have more bodies. And then if you find a way to give these people some form of citizenship or something along those lines, or you overwhelm them with free government benefits, then you create a perpetual voter base. That was their intention. But you got to be kidding me. At least I have to wonder how it was that no one weighed the risks when they were coming up with this plan, because this just didn't come up out of nowhere. When they came up with the plan, the idea that we're going to open the border wide open and flood our country with people from all over the world, I wonder if anybody had a moment of common sense and said, hey, you know what? This might be dangerous for our country. I wonder if that even came up, because we have enemies around the world whose sole focus, primary focus, is to come in here and wreak as much havoc as they possibly can. So did no one consider the fact that this might not be the smartest idea? I know we want voters. I know we want to increase our chances of staying in power. But the idea that nobody considered that is kind of crazy to me, even for the left. I mean, as bad as they are, as irrational as they often are, I would hope that somebody thought about it, but they probably just got shot down because they thought the benefits outweighed the risk. But when you see stuff like this going on, and as the previous former police investigator said, it seems clear to him that this was an ongoing plan. So just as we thought that things were bad enough there, we come to find out that there's way more going on, because NYPD was also, see if this is the one here. NYPD was also out again near Mamdani's house earlier today, and this is what they found.
News alert, 15 minutes past the hour, the FBI expanding the investigation into the two men who allegedly wanted to carry out a terror attack here in New York City, bigger than the Boston Marathon bombing. CB Cotton is hearing of some new police activity. We are seeing that now live outside of Gracie Mansion here in New York City. CB, what are we learning?
Hey, Sandra. Well, we are here in New York City's Upper East Side neighborhood. We're actually a couple blocks down from Gracie Mansion, which, yes, is the home of New York City Mayor Zohran Mamdani. Right now, officers are investigating a suspicious device that was found in a popular park nearby called Carl Schurz. We've seen officers block off this area to traffic, and we've got members of the NYPD bomb squad and another command unit that are out here again.
So we had the improvised explosive device in Pennsylvania get set off last night. Today, it looks like they found some more devices near the mayor's house.
Suspicious device was located in a nearby park.
Or a nearby park. I'm not sure how far away, but in a nearby park.
Someone called it in. I'm told this by a police source, and now officers are investigating. No one is being allowed to drive through this area. And we've also seen, we've also noticed that officers have bomb sniffing dogs that are moving through this area on side streets, going by homes just to look and see whether anything suspicious is uncovered. Obviously, this comes at a very heightened time for people who live in this area, because we know a terrorism investigation is underway after the FBI says two suspects brought homemade bombs to an anti-Muslim protest in New York City on Saturday. Thankfully, neither detonated, but police have said one of them could have caused a devastating loss of life because it contained a substance called TATP. We also know the investigation into these two suspects has now expanded into Pennsylvania, where police say the two men were from. We know overnight there was a controlled detonation at a Pennsylvania storage unit, where officers also found more homemade bombs. And now the latest update coming here out of New York City today, the Upper East Side neighborhood, just a couple blocks down from New York City Mayor Zohran Mamdani's official residence, Gracie Mansion. Officers telling us a suspicious device was located in a nearby park, and now they are investigating. Again, all the streets have been blocked off to traffic, and we're watching as bomb sniffing dogs move through this area. Residents that I'm speaking with are definitely on high alert. They're concerned and they're confused. Right now, we don't know whether this package that was noticed in the park is anything serious, but certainly officers have every reason to take it seriously and thoroughly investigate this, because again, on Saturday, police say two suspects brought homemade explosives to an anti-Muslim protest. We know those suspects are now facing federal terrorism charges. They had their first appearances in court yesterday, and they are due back in court again early next month. The latest here on the ground is that officers are diligently looking through this neighborhood to see what this suspicious device may be and whether they need to start evacuating residents from this area.
Now, I'm hoping that there's really nothing to it. As a cop, when I was on the force here in Vegas, we would get bomb calls. There would be bomb threats that would happen pretty frequently over the years. It wasn't a thing for it to happen at least once a month, probably more, maybe twice a month. Almost every time it was nothing. Maybe a package by some crazy dude, or sometimes people would just tie toy grenades or things like that, put them in weird places. So the smart thing would be for people to call it in. I can't recall there being any legit explosive device that I came in contact with. Not right off the top of my head. There might have been one, but thankfully everything was handled with no issues, no one getting hurt or harmed. So I'm going to see if there's anything current, because this came out a few hours ago. I'm going to see if there's anything brand new on this incident, or if anybody in the chat or in the comments knows anything, please put it down in the chat or in the comments so I can possibly update this. But let me share with y'all a couple of photos. So we can just share a tab here. Yeah, let me share a few photos with everyone of what this whole thing looked like. I mean, I don't know if y'all can see that. Let me see if I can make this a little bigger for y'all. Make me a little smaller for y'all. There we go. There we go. This is what they had set off. I mean, that's nuts. See if I can give you a couple more photos. I mean, dude lit it and threw it, and thankfully, again, none of them worked, which is a blessing in and of itself. The Lord, and you're hearing a lot of talk about these guys who were involved, who were protesting as being white supremacists. One guy's name is Jake Lang. I've heard of him before, vaguely, or I think I've seen him before. And I know that he's very outspoken. He's a former J6 protester. I think he was arrested during J6, and has no problem letting the world know his take on Islam. I don't know much about him other than that. So whether the allegations of him being a racist or white supremacist are true, I honestly can't say. Nowadays, that term is thrown around left and right. You honestly don't know when it applies or when it doesn't. But yeah, that's where we stand right now with this whole situation. Again, we're thankful that no one was hurt, but I want to talk about how the media responded. I mentioned it earlier. The initial response, or the initial claim, was that it was an attack on Mamdani, but we quickly found out that that wasn't the case. Now, whether this situation right now with the additional IED is related to him or someone else, or is even a thing, time will have to tell on that. But the initial attack, it was clear, was against the protesters. But CNN, not to be CNN and all their wisdom, and I say that totally tongue in cheek, decided that they wanted to post about this on X. So let's see how that went. Folks, you honestly can't make this up when it comes to CNN. They always find an opportunity to embarrass themselves. Check this out.
Because they're fake news. We know that, They're fake news. They are the biggest fakers in the world.
All right, y'all. We got a doozy today because we busted CNN many times for lying before in the past, but they have outdone themselves today. And I didn't even know that was possible. And just in case you needed more proof that CNN is diabolical, absolutely disgraceful, which is why we call them clown news and commie news network up in here. But for those of y'all that still have to suffer these Thanksgiving meals and these.
I'm on the Devin Gibson. I think his name is Devin Gibson channel. He's pretty funny. The brother seems to be pretty devout in his Christian faith. So I don't know where he stands in every aspect on a theological level, but his content seems pretty enjoyable.
Get-togethers with your family that consumes the brain rot that they call reporting over there. Journal activism is what it really is. Here's some more evidence for you to dish out to any of those family members or friends that are still lost and delusional and confused by the stuff that CNN puts out, that hot garbage. The internet is blowing up right now, specifically X, or formerly known as Twitter. That's where I get a lot of my news from. I don't watch the mainstream. I use clips from Fox and Newsmax from time to time, but X is where it's at when it comes to genuine reporting and real.
Let me tell y'all something. If you don't have an X page and you want to be up to date on the news, do yourself a favor and get an X account and just find a host of independent news outlets, journalists. That's what I do. Now, I'll pull up Fox sometimes and some more specifically conservative leaning outlets because I believe that they at least strive or try to be consistent, but I primarily get my news from X. When Charlie Kirk was shot, I went to X to see what was going on because I knew there would be some boots on the ground and you would get some direct footage so you know exactly what went down. And that seems to be the case in almost every situation. Almost every case, everything that has happened in recent months, there's somebody who's there and you get the unadulterated news, information. I was thinking of another term, it's escaped my mind. Unbiased, to the best of their ability. And uncensored is the term I was looking for, not a hard word, but you get the uncensored content. So you're more likely to know exactly what's going on. Let me throw this comment up here real quick. What's up, Laura? Do you think this is a hoax or do you think it's real? Which one are you talking about? You're talking about the device near Mom Donnie's house? I'm always getting it's like a tongue twister saying his name. Or you think the one where they tried to throw the explosive device? If it's the explosive device, the initial one from the other day, personally, I don't think it would be that because people already have an impression or a mindset that Islam is a violent religion. And the sad reality is that is historically documented. But so I don't think that one would be. I see you just posted again. Yeah, the one near his home. Now that's a good question. I didn't really think about that, but that is very possible that it was kind of put there to draw some of the attention away from the incident from the weekend and maybe framed to make him look like he's a victim. I wouldn't be shocked, especially when you're dealing with Marxists and people on the radical left. They will do it doesn't matter whether it's you lie or making up stories or whatever is necessary, but the agenda is your primary focus. So I wouldn't put anything past these folks. I wouldn't even put anything past them as far as lying, because if you read some of the writings of some of their the people who agree with them, some of the folks like I think it's Antonio Gramsci and folks like that throughout history who have been radical Marxists. The agenda, the entire goal of changing whatever nation or wherever they're at, city, state, and molded into a Marxist location to install Marxist values and policies, whatever's necessary, because they look at capitalism as it is the ultimate evil. And Mamdani, he's really weird. I think as time goes on, we'll really see what this dude's all about, because when you really look at it, Islam and leftism, this radical leftism, or I shouldn't even say radical, because leftism is radical in and of itself, but they just don't go together. The left is very pro, you do what you want to do, especially sexually, and Islam is none of that. And I think that as time goes on, if the agendas continue to grow, if both of these sides continue to build, they will clash. It's just a matter of time. The whole idea of these queers for Islam and all this kind of for Gaza, it's like a joke to me. And I know it's, for some people, it's just it's as long as it's anti-Christian or anti-Jewish, they're all for it, but they have no idea what's coming. If Islam grows and gains power, all anyone has to do is just do a simple search of history, and I think they would pull their support for a lot of these organizations or a lot of these movements, especially Islam in and of itself. But let's get back to the video here. But good question, Laura. I appreciate that.
Real journalism. So Right Angle News Network says, breaking, CNN is now facing mass calls to fire every single employee involved in writing and approving a sympathetic headline, which has since been deleted, about the 2 Muslims who attempted to carry out an attack on conservatives in New York City. You know, the one that Mamdani was claiming it was white bigotry and the white man bad for 2 terrorists that tried to attack people here in the United States. It just makes absolutely no sense. No brainstem connected activity. Y'all know how these radical, evil Democrats are. No, here's what Rapid Response 47 says. No, the radical Islamic terrorists who threw an IED at a protest. We don't do that in America. That is a no-no. You just can't make this stuff up, y'all. Here's the actual post that CNN made that has since been deleted and taken down. I wonder why. You're about to see here in a second, but it reads, 2 Pennsylvania teenagers crossed into New York City Saturday morning for what could have been a normal day enjoying the city during abnormally warm weather. Could have been a normal day if they were normal, brainstem connected, righteous, Jesus-loving individuals, but they are most definitely not that. But in less than an hour, their lives would drastically change as the pair would be arrested for throwing homemade bombs during an anti-Muslim protest outside of Mayor Zoran Mamdani's house.
I'm just going to let that hover out there for a second. Look at this post. Look at this. The story was these 2 ISIS sympathizers attempted to bomb a protest. And CNN starts it off with 2 Pennsylvania teens crossed into New York City morning for what could have been a normal day, enjoying the city during an abnormally warm weather. And then they get into the reality that they tried to bomb a crowd of people. These people are crazy, y'all. These people, CNN, this is why they're panicking when Paramount bought out Warner Brothers Discovery or whatever the full deal was. Because foolishness like this, most likely, now Paramount isn't like all that, but they're a bit less woke than the people running CNN and all these other insane networks and channels. But they're freaking out because they won't be able to get away with this nonsense, hopefully. But imagine if this script was flipped. There was a crowd of Muslims protesting, and then some Christians showed up and tried to bomb them. What do you think the story would be? Radical, white nationalist Christians or whoever they were attempt to murder a crowd full of peaceful Islamic protesters. There would be none of this fluff to make you think that these people were just innocent little boys or something like that. These were grown men I think it's like 18 and 19 years old, legally grown men. This is disgusting. And this is why I stopped watching CNN a long time ago. And this is why I highly recommend everyone stop watching them. If you're still out there watching this drivel, this garbage, and you think you're being informed fairly, properly, you're fooling yourself.
Here's what we know so far. Well, we know the fact that they deleted this post. That's what we do know. And they've taken it down. They didn't want it to be seen because just two Pennsylvania teenagers, right? But in reality, they're two domestic terrorists. They're anti-America. They're trying to implement their Islam agenda. Now, fast forward to today, literally an hour ago, March 10th at 8:38 a.m. March 10th is today. This already has almost 1 million views. And we're going to go through some comments on these posts because spot on, hilarious, just doesn't do them justice. But of course, CNN, they're always going to try to cover their tracks. They're always going to try to masquerade like they have good intentions. They want to get the truth out there. They want you to think that that's their end goal, but we know in reality it is not. And the end of this post, it cracks me up. I'm going to read it to you. A post regarding the two individuals arrested for throwing homemade bombs outside of the mayor's home failed to reflect the gravity of the incident. You don't say, thereby breaching the editorial standards we require for all our reporting. When did that start? Because I've never seen any standard other than if you hate Trump, if you have TDS, go ahead and run with it. Make everything seem like the big orange man is bad, that Christians are terrible. We got to tear down this democracy, even though it's a constitutional republic. All sorts of just out of touch realities that promote Satan's agenda. It's always them twisting what's really good and making it evil, and twisting evil as though it's the good thing, when in reality it is in fact not. So they said this breached our editorial standards that we know they don't have, that we require for all our reporting. It has therefore been deleted.
But somehow it managed to make it out. Their editorial standings, my man's breaking it down better than I can. What are their editorial standards? Honestly, do they really even have any? Because this is just crazy to me. But he nails it right on the head. Now, I know some folks who got serious cases of TDS. There's nothing Donald Trump could do to please these folks. But I hope, if any of y'all are watching, because you know who you are, and you know I love you, but if any of y'all are watching, what do you think of this? And it's all overlapping. There's a worldview that they want to promote. There is anybody who speaks out and says anything negative about Islam or anybody in the LGBT community or any minority, as bad as it may be, or as truthful as it may be, some of the things that these individuals may do, as harmful as they may be, violent, dangerous, deadly, there'll be somebody out there looking to make them out to be the victim, the offender. And if you don't believe me, all you have to do is just think back on when we had the mass shootings, especially just any of the recent ones. I can't even point one because there's so many. But when you look at some of these recent mass shootings that involve someone from a lot of these trans shooters, there's always somebody out there who wants to make them out to be the victim. Last year or the year prior, when we had one, I think it was a shooting in Nashville, where the girl who thought that she was a man or boy, or I think she was older, she was an adult. She went into that Christian school, shot up the Christian school. And I think it was Corinne Jean-Pierre, Biden's press secretary. I think she was basically trying to word it to where it was the shooter was somehow victimized. And the people on The View and on CNN were trying to make it out. All these trans people are going through so much. And I'm not trying to minimize the issues, some of the struggles that these people go through. My heart goes out to them, honestly. But we have to be willing to call a spade a spade. And when you see someone do something evil, call it out. And if there's a link between the two, you have to honestly assess that. But these folks on these left-leaning channels, They don't know how to do that. They cannot look at themselves in the mirror and say, you know what, maybe there's a problem with all these drugs that we're giving these people. And maybe there's an issue, a deeper issue with someone who's willing to take healthy body parts and cut them off because they believe they're trapped in the wrong body. Maybe there's something deeper going on that we need to look at. And maybe this whole idea of supporting them with in their mental illness isn't helping them at all. Maybe that's a possibility, but a lot of these folks refuse to do that.
In these comments, we got to read them. In Wokeness says, the internet is forever. Yes, indeed it is. Take a look at what Matt Van Swole says. He's a former Democrat, just like myself. I grew up being brainwashed by that nonsense, that hot garbage that was spewed all over the place as though it was true. And we know that's just not the way. A righteous person inclines to the right, and we live in the truth. A lefty, they just don't. And I believe there's an old saying that goes, if you're not a liberal at 20, you have no heart. But if you're not a conservative by 30, you have no brain. And that couldn't be more true. And Matt Van Swole said, I trusted you to tell me the truth for nearly a decade, referring to Clown News. I trusted you. I am still paying for that price. You're an evil piece of propaganda garbage that wrecked my worldview for years.
My man hit it right on the head. Here's a comment here I want to bring up. We're a nation under the Romans 1, God's wrath of abandonment. Nothing else explains trans delusion, abortion, portraying evil individuals as good. Truth, let me tell you something. I can't argue with that, honestly. I wonder about that all the time. I've been doing a pretty deep dive over the last year and a half or so in the Old Testament, and I consistently see these nations falling into idolatry, the nation of Israel, nation of Judah, especially after the divided kingdom or before. They constantly fell into idolatry, false worship, disobedience, period. And God would constantly call them to come back to him, but they couldn't help themselves. They had to be like the other nations around them, and they suffered for it. And there comes a time where God gives people over to their delusions, to their sin. Like he strengthens them in their resolve, as I heard it put. And with these people being so radicalized, I can't help but wonder if what you're saying is true, whether it's true or not. I thoroughly believe you've hit it right on the head.
As they have many, and as they are still continuing to do. And then another great account to follow on X, always nails it with the humor and just the facts, the truth bombs. Cat Turd said, you purposely pushed a false narrative that was the exact opposite of what happened, to push Democrat propaganda. Eric Darty, you sympathize with Islamic terrorism. Standards required for all your reporting? Come on.
Yeah, honestly, anybody, again, with half a brain knows that CNN is full of it. There was a time where I used to watch them religiously. I used to watch I would record the Situation Room with Wolf Blitzer on my DVR. And I've told this story here before, so this is nothing new for anybody who's been following me for any length of time. I was a faithful Democrat, faithful. And I didn't agree with everything that they did. I always struggled with the abortion thing. And the more they got into the gay marriage and all this trans stuff, when that really started becoming a thing, I was moving further and further away, or they were moving further and further away from me. I would justify abortion and basically say, well, you know what? I don't think it's right. I wouldn't do it. I would let come out of my mouth. I wouldn't do it, but I don't think we should take that right away from anybody. Or I would deflect. I would try to change the conversation. But it wasn't until I got truly saved to where I saw the inconsistencies between being a devout Christian, a man truly trying to serve Christ, and following this evil party. Their policies are evil. And the term demonic is thrown around left and right to a degree to where it's almost lost its meaning. It's kind of like racist. But when you really look at what they do and you have any level of biblical understanding, to the degree that they want to extinguish, I'll use the term, babies, infants in the womb. There's no other way to put it in my mind. That's Baal worship. That's Asheroth worship. Things that we see in the Bible. People, I'm in Jeremiah right now, and the Lord is speaking through Jeremiah and saying how they were passing their babies through the fire, offering them as sacrifices to these false gods. Just got finished reading Isaiah, same thing. And to me, the abortion issue is no different. The absolute insanity when it comes to sexuality, no different whatsoever. So going back to what you said, truth, is it truth, Chuan? I think you're spot on. But as an additional reminder for anybody who, oh, you know what, CNN really ain't that bad. For those of you who know, maybe you hadn't been around, but just a little reminder of how bad CNN can get and how bad they've been historically. Let me bring this over here. Got a couple screens I'm working with. Just in case anyone needs a reminder, this was back in 2020 when the world was on fire, basically behind George Floyd. This is what they posted, and this is CNN and a little clip from MSNBC.
And what you are seeing now, these images came and come in stark contrast to what we saw over the course of the daytime hours in Kenosha and into the early evening, which were largely peaceful demonstrations in the face of law enforcement. It wasn't until night fell that things began to get a little bit more contentious. Things were thrown back and forth.
I want to be clear in how I characterize.
Let me back that up, y'all, in case you didn't see it. The little lower third, you have a fire in the background behind my man. And listen how he's explaining everything.
These images came and come in stark contrast to what we saw over the course of the daytime.
Over here on the right, if you can see, you have protesters throwing ice bottles with frozen water. They're throwing it at the police. As the camera pans over to the right, you see the police standing over there with shields. There were thousands of officers that were injured during these George Floyd BLM protests in 2020. Tens of thousands of officers that were injured across the country. I've heard consistently that there was over $2 billion worth of damage. I recently heard it put $2 billion worth of damage as far as insured, and maybe another $2 billion for those who were uninsured across the nation. These protests in 2020 that people so quickly want to ignore or forget were some of the worst in our country's history. The worst.
Hours in Kenosha and into the early evening, which were largely peaceful demonstrations.
So it says fiery but mostly peaceful protests after police shooting. Yeah, this was Kenosha. I think that had to do with the Jacob Blake incident. So the George Floyd incident took place. You had the Jacob Blake incident where he went to get his daughter when he wasn't supposed to. His baby's mom or ex-wife, whatever she was, called the police. He had a knife. He got tased. He went down. They kept telling him to drop the knife. He grabs the knife, stands up. We don't get the body cam footage until weeks or if not months later. That's what really pissed me off about this whole thing. Way later, we get the body cam footage with him having a knife. He goes to get into his police vehicle and he goes to get into his car, and then the police shoot him. Completely justified shooting if you have any knowledge of how police are trained when it comes to self-defense, especially not allowing a suspect to go into his vehicle. Dude with a knife, fighting the police, picks up the knife. Instead of just surrendering, he ends up getting shot. I think he's still paralyzed from his waist down. But initially, he was vilified. He was made to look like he wasn't vilified. He was glorified. He was celebrated. He was made to look like the victim, even though he wasn't. It wasn't until much later where the truth finally came out. And I'll always remember that the Milwaukee Bucks, the basketball team, walked off the court in protest. I think it was Doc Rivers, former coach of the Boston Celtics, former player former coach of the Milwaukee Bucks, and I think also Philadelphia 76ers, when I used to watch the NBA all the time. But after Trump got elected, they lost their damn minds. All they did was talk about racism and how evil Trump was. ESPN, the NBA, during the lockdowns, on the floor, beat Black Lives Matter, and people say her name on their jerseys. The wokeness got nauseating. It was disgusting. And it was completely based on consistent false narratives throughout our country, that racism is everywhere and that racism was behind George Floyd dying. No, it wasn't. They never charged George Floyd with any type of hate crime, anything like that. Not George Floyd, Derek Chauvin, during the George Floyd incident. They never charged him with any type of hate crime whatsoever, because even Keith Ellison, he is the DA of, I think, the state of Minnesota, radical leftist. His name is being tossed around during all the corruption charges in Minnesota. But even he said there was no proof, there was no evidence of any type of consistent racism in that case. It was what we ultimately end up finding out, and even though this is still hidden by the masses, was that Derek Chauvin used a authorized police tactic in an attempt to restrain George Floyd, and George Floyd kept asking to be put on the ground. And George Floyd was full of so much drugs that he probably could have killed 10 people. But he had a heart condition. There were many factors that and I'm not sitting up here trying to give Derek Chauvin a complete and total pass. I wouldn't have used that tactic personally. Never would have put my knee on that close to somebody's neck. I would never have done that. At the same time, you had the police chief, the chiefs of police and his supervisors come up there and basically lie and say that that was not an authorized tactic. It wasn't until probably years later where we're finally hearing and learning that this was a policy that their department manual even actually has as far as a tactic to restrain the suspect. But they lied about it. They completely lied about it. Let's see this chat here. Thank you, Jenny. Fire in the back behind my man. That really, that's what's going on. Like, seriously, look at this. He's sitting up there all chill, calm voice and talking. But all this went on all over the country. All over the country. But every time the leftist media, mainstream media, the two are synonymous, every time they spoke about it, they minimized it. But J6 went on, lasted a couple of hours. Oh my gosh, the world is about to come to an end. They made it seem as if that was the worst thing that ever happened in our country. Honestly. Kamala Harris, if I'm not mistaken, said it was worse than 9/11. Or Joe Biden, one of them two knuckleheads, said it was worse than 9/11. That is insane to me. But yet here you had over 24 people killed, 24 people died related to these BLM George Floyd riots. Again, the billions of dollars that were lost, the property damage, the amount of businesses that were lost, the amount of officers injured, it's forgotten. They're still over there. They were still trying to investigate J6 4 years later. But what about all this that went down here? How long did that investigation last? How many people actually did time for all the crime and harm that went on in multiple states? 200 cities, if I'm not mistaken. But let's
demonstrations in the face of law enforcement. It wasn't until night fell that things began to get a little bit more contentious. Things were thrown back and forth.
I want to be clear in how I characterize this. This is mostly a protest. It is not generally speaking unruly, but fires have been started, and there's a crowd that is.
And then you look at the evidences for that.
I'm sorry, I clicked on the wrong thing. I wanted to pause it right there, but hold on. I clicked off of there because I didn't want the next video to pop up because that's some of the stuff I study when it comes to apologetics, but that's not the topic here. But I have to go back to that because the way dude was talking, man, I'm telling you, this is the saddest part about it. There we go. I'll pull it up here in a sec. The saddest part about it is they have their mindless drones out there who honestly have no critical thinking ability. And I'm not trying to be mean, but it's just a reality. Because if you can't see this and realize that you're being indoctrinated, that you're being manipulated, I don't know what to tell you. But let me get to this dude right here. Just listen to him. Big fire in the background.
Back and forth.
I want to be clear in how I characterize this. This is
Like he has to really get his words right. Listen to this again.
mostly a protest. It is not generally speaking unruly, but fires have been started, and
pathetic.
There's a crowd that is.
I keep hitting the button. I keep hitting too many buttons. But dude is talking like it's all good. Yeah, there've been fires started. You got a blaze behind you, bro. Like straight up. My goodness. This is embarrassing. And this is part of the many reasons why I stopped watching the leftist media. I stopped with MSNBC years before I stopped watching CNN. I think I stopped watching MSNBC maybe around 2008-ish, 2007, MSNBC I'm talking about. When I remember watching them, and some guy got up there and they were debating on whether Christianity was true, and this guy, and one of the hosts was talking like, we know this stuff isn't true. He was talking to his guests on there. We know this stuff isn't true, right? And the guy was like, yeah, like he was told, instead of being an impartial analyst, he was totally taking the side of the atheist. And that turned my stomach because I was professing some level of faith, even though I was all up in the world. And then I was watching one of the things that really got me wondering about the left, the Democratic Party in particular. I think it was 2007 or so during the Democratic National Convention. And they were talking about they wanted to add God back into their policy. And they were getting a yay or nay vote from the audience. And it was abundantly clear that nobody, or I would say very few people in the audience, wanted to have anything to do with God as far as a Democratic Party platform. It was like, for those who support it, say yay. And you hear yay or whatever. And then those who support it say no. Overwhelmingly, the no's rang out. And that was probably the first time like a bell or light went off in my head. Light bulb went off in my head and made me think, how is it that me as a professing Christian man can side with the party that is so anti-God? They didn't want to have anything to do with God. So the wheels started turning in my head, but it was a few years later where the Lord really got a hold of me and totally changed my life. Let me see here. Got a couple of chats here I want to pull up. When George Floyd was in the car, he was saying, I can't breathe, and they took him out to help him. Yeah, exactly. It wasn't like they had him on the ground. They tried to get him in the car. Dude was kicking and fighting and flailing. None of that says a man deserved to die, but there was a lot more things that went on than simply this officer put him on the ground and just suffocated him. There was a lot more going on than that. And we weren't even allowed to get all that information. Honestly, we weren't even allowed. And even the autopsy report, the initial one that came back, there were email exchanges that went back and forth where they spoke to, I think it was the DA was talking to, I'm not sure who it was they were communicating with, but they were saying, what happens? What do we do? Because they were concerned. What do we do when the information we get doesn't match the narrative that's been put forth? Because the narrative was that this was clearly a racist, abusive cop or a group of cops who killed George Floyd. That was the primary narrative. And again, there is some truth to that. It's not as far as the racism, but as far as the pure details. I'm not saying, again, did Derek Chauvin's knee on this man, this sick, drug fueled, I mean, my man was overwhelmed with drugs and severe health issues. All these things combined, I think what ultimately did George Floyd in. His lifestyle, his poor health, with the Officer Chauvin, him putting his knee on his neck could have impacted him to where he was struggling breathing. He had George Floyd had an enlarged heart. So I think it was a combination thereof. And what I think happened ultimately, Derek Chauvin was made a scapegoat. You had a culture that was buying into the BLM narrative. Donald Trump was elected president, so the world was saying, oh, he's a racist. Donald Trump is a racist now. And all these networks, everybody, the world, academia, Hollywood, sports, the mainstream media, as always, the Democrats, they all came together to paint anybody white, any police officer, these established, these are the same entities that I'm telling you that are attacked systemically, or systematically, I should say, by those on the left, the Marxists. This is all intentional. The core foundations of our society, law enforcement, the justice system as a whole, the family, religious institutions, all of those were made out to be, were villainized, were made out to be bad. And I think when Trump got back in office, it was, people were finally just fed up. People were just so done with all the foolishness. J6 is all the left can talk about. It was worse than the World War, World War 14. Literally, that's how they think. They still want to bring this up. Not generally unruly. Yeah, I mean, the fire, big fire in the back, bigger fire in the background with the dude from MSNBC. But yeah, I want to frame this properly. Yeah, this fire here, there's this big fire. This fire is going on, but this is generally a peaceful protest. But in the meantime, oh my gosh, like Jesus is about to come back. That's how bad things are going. There's wars and rumors of wars based on J6, like in their mind. That's what they were thinking. Insane, y'all. Never let a crisis go to waste. 100%. Who was it? Who said that? I know it was I think it was one of Obama's boys from Chicago. Rahm Emanuel, was that it? Who said that? It might be dated back further than him, but that is 100% fact. That's why everything turns into a big deal. Everything. Doge starts to defund all these different organizations, massive protests. You have all these paid protesters going out there doing what they do, and 100%. Thank you, Jenny. Rahm Emanuel, yes. And you have all these paid protesters going out there. So for the ill-informed or the uninformed, they're looking at all this and they're like, man, this some bad things must be happening. Why do you have protests going on across the country? Man, Trump is terrible. What's he doing? Everything that man does, they react like the sky is falling. Everything that he does. The mass immigration movement that he had, trying to kick people out of this country who should be kicked out. Personally, I'm really not sympathetic towards all these people who come here illegally. I know, on one degree I am, because I know that some of these other countries are horrendous. But when you have people traveling across the globe to get to the U.S. illegally, just jumping, cutting the line, getting in front of people who are trying to do it the right way, I'm sorry. I know a lot of these other countries are terrible. and I do feel bad for you in that sense. But overall, you got to do it the right way. You just can't come bogarting and come walking up in here like you own the place, kicking your feet up on somebody else's house. And then you had all the foolish protest dudes waving Mexican flags, burning up cars in LA and talking about and waving up Mexican flags and living in our country. Man, these people disgust me. So my sympathy only goes so far. They create the crisis, then say never let a crisis go to waste. That's what they do. Every time you turn around, that's what they do. All the garbage that went on in Minneapolis. Crazy stuff. Let me share with you this video on this is horrible, y'all. This is horrible. A high school prank that just went bad. And let me know what you think. As we watch this video, let me know what your thoughts are. Because I can't say I'm torn, but it's just a sucky situation all the way.
Now facing over a Georgia teen now facing over a decade behind bars after allegedly killing his math teacher. According to reports, 18-year-old Jaden Wallace and 4 friends were at the teacher's home throwing toilet paper. Jason Hughes then came out but tripped on the wet road because it had been raining and fell. That's when the teen who was allegedly trying to drive away ran Hughes over, killing him. This all happening just hours after the school district issued a warning to students about pranks that have gone too far in the past. Fox.
Now, that was all I knew initially. I've been hearing about a prank gone bad, and I thought it was just some kid just being completely irresponsible until I started hearing some more of the details. And here they are.
News contributor and criminal defense attorney Josh Ritter joins me now. Josh, a horribly tragic case. The teacher and the student reportedly very close. The teacher knew these pranksters were going to be going to his home. He was actually excited to kind of confront them. This is a tradition at the school. In light of all this, how do you expect prosecutors to approach this case?
This is an excellent illustration for how difficult it can be for prosecutors to make these types of decisions. Exactly as you pointed out, you have this teacher who lost his life. He's a husband. He's a father. Then you have the young man responsible for his death, who I think by all accounts, no one is arguing that he had any kind of malicious intent. This was a prank gone incredibly wrong. But the way that the prosecutors are going to look at this and the arguments they're going to make is that the concept of implied malice, that by driving his vehicle recklessly, by taking part in this prank and by driving away, even though it appears as though the teacher tripping may have contributed in some part to that as an accident, his reckless driving will give them that implied malice to arrive at a second-degree murder charge. I will tell you, though, it sounds like a difficult argument that they're going to have to make to jurors in this case.
I think, especially in light of what I'm about to read, the teacher's family says they would support dropping the charges against the students involved, releasing a statement, quote, "Our family wants to thank the Hall County community for the outpouring of prayers and support and the respect for our privacy as we grieve the loss of Jason. We ask that you continue to pray for our family and also for the students involved in the accident, along with their families. Please join us in extending grace and mercy to them as Christ has done for us."
Wow. That's all I can say is wow right there. It sounds like it was just a series of coincidences that fell together, which ultimately led up to this teacher falling and the kid running him over. I mean, that's crazy. Let me know what you think, y'all. I mean, right now, I feel, to some degree, I feel their pain. I feel the family's pain. I mean, they're truly being gracious to this young man because I'm sure they know that he had no ill will. That's how it's coming across. And at the same time, it's like, what do you do if you're a DA? This kid's got to live with that the rest of his life. I don't know anything about him, but just based off of this, it doesn't sound like he should be charged with any type of murder charge. It just doesn't sound like that. Not to me.
How much does a statement like that, Josh, influence the prosecutors?
There you go. I think it will influence them. I mean, they represent the people of their state, and they are supposed to bring charges and prosecute crimes, regardless sometimes of how the victims and the victim's family may feel about it. And that's an uncomfortable position for them to be in. If they feel that a crime has been committed, though, their job is to pursue justice. But this circumstance here, again, even the family is describing it as a horrible accident. How do you get from something that sounds like no one intended for this to happen, and there was even perhaps a contributing factor of the teacher tripping himself, to criminal charges when it's clear that there was no criminal intent on the part of this young man? It's difficult. I'm hopeful, actually, that maybe these words from the family will affect the prosecutors in this case, and they can find some way of at least a plea bargain, something short of a trial, and sending him to prison for a very long time.
Is that your gut instinct, quickly, because we got to run, but is your gut instinct telling you case gets ultimately dropped or resolved with a very, very low sentence?
Yeah, he's got no criminal record. There's no obvious criminal intent. It looks like an incredible lesson learned, and I'm hoping that they can resolve it short of a trial.
Just an absolute tragedy. Just having some fun. That fun led to a death. Josh Ritter, thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
Yeah, this is one of them situations that you're like, heart breaks for everyone involved, honestly. But I don't know. I can't even say but. It's just bad. A school tradition. It sounds like the teacher was in on it. So what do you do in that situation? Again, personally, if it's me, I don't see how I could, unless there are other circumstances, other extenuating circumstances going on. I don't see how they could do something like that, allow this to continue on. And as far as him having these such serious charges pressed on him, I don't know. But let me know what y'all think down in the comments. Once again, I appreciate y'all for joining me. Lord willing, you'll see me again on Thursday as we go through the next episode of the Code Red Conversation Show with Eric Muldrow. In the meantime, as always, stay safe, God bless, and make sure you join the conversation. Peace out.